Alright, hey guys. So, I know it's been a while since we last made a video, but because there's a new patch that came out around a week ago, so all the previous videos I made are kind of outdated and irrelevant, so I figured since I might as well like not edit them and make a completely new version so you guys are updated on the new changes. Okay. So without further ado, I'll just dive into the early game. So I think in my previous video, I touched upon how the game works. You could have likely skipped it if you already played the game for enough time by now. So what you want to know about the early game is that there are actually a lot of exceptions to the other rules of the game that I talked about. So at the start of the game, the first exception is the carousel, right? So you notice how everyone starts at 100 health. So there's no real pick order when it comes to the early game, right? Everyone just goes in at once because everyone's the same health. Um, and that's the only part of the game where that happens, right? Every other carousel has a pick order to it. So what you want to do in the early game pick order is you want to pick. Basically, it doesn't matter what item you pick. Like a lot of people say, oh, recurve bow is the best. Shield's the best. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. Just pick a green, right? So why you want to pick a green is because green costs 2 gold, right? So usually what you want to do is like what I do here. After the first carousel, there's like 3 waves of minions, right? Until you face real players. And you also gain less gold per round, right? So you see how after the first round of minions, I only gained 2 gold. So I could only afford Darius and Garen. We'll talk more about these units later. But basically, I only had 2 gold, right? So then I proceed to sell Ari, which is a green, for 2 more gold to pick up Tristana and Graves. Okay, so I used 4 gold here. Whereas if I picked up a gray minion, then I would have only had 3 gold, right? And that's a big difference in the early game because the early game you want to collect as many $1 units as possible. We'll talk more about this later. But anyways, even without being said, uh, 3 gold and 4 gold at this point in the game, that's like a 25% increase in gold, right? That's a huge difference. So because of the lack of gold early on, gold generation is very important, and that's why you should just pick a green always, right? And I talk about this, but after the first carousel, there's 3 rounds of units, right? So you level up pretty fast. You go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, right? In the first 3 rounds. And you see here what I'm doing is I'm just amassing a bunch of 1 cost units, right? And the reason for this is because in the early game, units are probably distributed at around this because once you hit level 3, this is the approximate distribution. And so you see it makes a lot of sense to pick up a lot of gray units here, right? Because A, they're cheap, they're affordable at this stage in the game, because you have so little gold. And amassing a lot of green is very risky, right? Because it uses up a lot of gold. And because you're using up a lot of gold, you might not be able to complete that 2-star green, right? Because A, um, all your gold is invested in the green, and B, the percentage of getting a green to begin with is quite low, much less a green of the same name, right? So it makes much more sense to just collect a bunch of grays and try and make 2-star grays here because there's more probability you're going to do that, much higher probability, right? So with that being said, now that you know the goal of the game at this point is to collect a bunch of gray units, which gray units should you get, right? Well, a lot of people have their own tier lists, but this is like my personal preference just from playing the game. I think let's just begin with the A tier, right? So Garen, Garen is just like super good. He's probably like without a doubt the best 1 cost unit, right? His special is ultimate. By the way, when a unit gets attacked, right, they gain mana, or when they attack, they gain mana. And when they reach 100 mana, they can use an ultimate ability, right? So Garen's ultimate ability is he spins around, deals a lot of damage, right? And Garen also is a good damage taker. So how unit strength is usually defined is units generally either deal damage, take damage, or they do something super special, right? And if you can't do any of those, then you're garbage, right? You're useless. So Garen, not only is he really good at taking damage, but he's also like he deals a lot of damage in the early game, right? So Garen is like by far the best one cost unit here. Kassadin's kind of an exception, right? So Kassadin, he actually is pretty good at taking damage, and he actually has no ultimate ability, but his special effect is that every time he attacks, he steals mana from other units, so they can't ult, right? So Kassadin himself has no ult, but he also makes the other unit not able to ult, right? And he also converts that mana into a shield. So Kassadin's job is basically to make the unit he's attacking more useless than him. So Kassadin wins like every single 1v1 in the early game, right? So Kassadin versus a Garen, one-on-one, Kassadin will win. But it's a team of 3, right? So usually somebody else gets to murk Kassadin before Kassadin gets to do anything. So yeah, Kassadin's not as good as Garen, but still really damn good. So in the B tier, you have some other knights. So by the way, it's good to mention that Garen's a knight, and we talk about synergies, right? So you want more knights if you find Garen. Darius, Mordekaiser are both knights as well, right? So early on, you can get that knight synergy very easily, and knights are really good at taking damage right now. And Darius, his ultimate, he spins around in a circle, not as many times as Garen, but still spins around a circle pretty good. Mordekaiser slams his mace on the floor, deals a bunch of damage. But these all deal a bunch of damage early game, but later on, they just deal no damage. They're just good for taking damage, right? So damage takers are all pretty good early on in the game. That's really what you want to set up because you can just adjust your front line, back line later on, and just keep your front line the same. Right? On Nidalee is a wild shapeshifter. So Nidalee actually, when she ults, she becomes pretty tanky, and she also heals a bunch of units. So Nidalee is pretty good. Elise also shapeshifter. So the reason why Elise and Nidalee are up here because shapeshifters are actually like pretty good right now. I feel I've run into a bunch of shapeshifter teams and they've absolutely destroyed me. And demons are also pretty good right now, at least demon shapeshifter. So her synergies are pretty good, but she doesn't really deal a lot of damage. And I guess she can take a bunch of damage because she summons like a little spider, right? And that's not bad. So at least it's half decent. Um, Kha'Zix is really good, right? Kha'Zix is an assassin. Assassins are really good early on because I think I mentioned this before, but assassins, if I didn't, they jump to the backline and they deal damage to other damage dealers, right? So generally, backline units are damage dealers, not damage takers. Hence, if Kha'Zix is dealing damage to a damage dealer, not a damage taker, he's going to deal a lot of damage, probably going to kill them, right? So, because of that, Kha'Zix is pretty damn good early on in the game. He's almost A tier to be honest, except assassins are straight dookie right now. So Kha'Zix is only good for probably first 3 stages, and then you're gonna have to let him go, right? Warwick is also a damage taker, but he's not a knight. He's a brawler. So brawlers are also really good at taking damage. We'll talk more about the difference between brawlers and knights later in the synergies video. But yeah, Warwick's job is to take damage. He doesn't deal as much damage as these knights early on in the game, but he also is better at taking damage. And he's also better in the mid game. We'll talk about that later. Um, Tristana. Tristana probably deserves to be C tier, to be honest. So she's a gunslinger, Yordle gunslinger. She her job is to be a damage dealer, but she doesn't deal as much damage as like Kha'Zix, Nilly, for example. Nilly deals a lot of damage. So she's okay, but she attacks from really far. So she's actually pretty good at keeping herself safe. And gunslingers are also really strong right now. So yeah, Tristana is pretty good. These are the C tier. Oh, I forgot to add Camille. Camille. So that's a new one, right? So ideally, if you don't find any of these champions, then you want to pick these guys up. Or if you are trying to go for synergies, right? So these units on their own, they're pretty weak, but their synergies are sometimes pretty strong. So you might just pick them up for like a good synergy. A good example of that would be Camille. So Camille doesn't deal damage. She also doesn't take damage. She's just pretty useless right now. But she is a Blade Master Hex Tech, which are both really strong synergies, right? So Camille is basically just there for synergies. Graves, same thing. Graves actually deals a lot of damage. What hurts him is he doesn't have an ultimate. And unlike Casson, he doesn't really prevent others from ulting. So that's really a drawback later on. But he does deal a lot of damage. He's also not that good at taking damage. But he's also a frontline, right? So I think the thing is if you right click on a unit, you can see their range, how far they can attack. I mentioned Tristana can attack from the back, so she can stay safe. Graves needs to walk up and attack, so he's really vulnerable to a lot of attacks. He's going to get targeted, he's going to die pretty fast. So you won't really get his damage off. Which is a big problem for Graves, that's why he's C tier. But again, he is a gunslinger, so if you find Tristana, picking up Graves is not a bad idea. Vayne is a noble ranger. Right now, rangers suck because, I mean, all the backline units just do better than rangers at everything. She is a noble, so if you are going nobles, then Vayne is okay. But I mean, she's not really worth picking up uh, early on. Fiora also a noble, right? So if you have these three, nobles is actually really strong right now. The noble buff. However, the noble buff on one person is kind of like whatever. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, nobles is pretty good. So if you find Garen and Vayne and Fiora, that's when you put them on, right? But these two on their own without the noble buff is kind of not really worth it because Vayne doesn't deal that much damage even though she's damage dealer. She's also really bad at taking damage. Fiora is the exact same as Camille, right? They're both Blade Masters. And Graves as well, right? So these guys need to go up to the front to attack, and in the front they're more vulnerable to attacks, and they're going to die really easily, so they can't get their damage off, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's a one cost unit analysis. So I guess to give more clarity on the synergies and why some units are good together, that'll be covered in the next video. We'll talk about synergies, so stay tuned.